So, my topic today is to talk with you all about mindfulness from a psychologist's perspective. And I'm a psychologist, by the way. Some of the early material on the website and such put out misidentified me as a psychiatrist. This is a really common mistake. People confuse psychiatrists and psychologists all the time. So if you want to remember the difference between a psychiatrist and psychologist, it's really pretty easy. You just need to remember that psychiatrists are cool and good-looking and articulate and funny. So if any of you are looking for that, you might want to lower the expectations a little bit. I stand up here actually just acutely aware of what Andy talked about last week, of having really, in some ways, nothing new to say to you, only a different perspective from a different angle. But maybe it is good to have a psychologist talking about mindfulness. There's a lot of psychologists who apply mindfulness in our work. In fact, it's pretty trendy in my field right now. This might be related to the fact that, unlike our psychiatry brethren, we don't prescribe medication. Also, the effective use of mindfulness-based strategies requires almost a kind of non-medical mindset to apply, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a minute. But it sort of lends itself to a field in which applying non-pharmaceutical strategies to help people more effectively manage difficult situations, emotional challenges, and mental health issues, it sort of fits. Much of the current application of mindfulness in the psychology field is largely attributable to the work of a fellow named Jon Kabat-Zinn in the 1980s and 90s, and many of you may be familiar with him. He's at the University of Massachusetts School of Medicine, or was. Dr. Kabat-Zinn was a Zen Buddhist as well as a psychologist, and he set up a program that applied some of the concepts of Buddhist meditation practice, though he removed the Buddhist framework and called what he did mindfulness-based stress reduction, very technical sounding. I appreciate in a lot of ways the work of Kabat-Zinn and a lot of the research that his work spawned. He sort of called attention to the fact that mindfulness applications can be applied to all sorts of things. There's evidence that, as Melanie was talking about, that regular engagement in mindfulness practices contribute to improved health outcomes across the board, from things like people suffering from fibromyalgia, various cancer diagnoses, coronary artery disease, depression, chronic pain, anxiety, obesity, binge eating disorder. Mindfulness also appears to be linked to enhanced immune functioning, improved sleep, increased relationship satisfaction, and even improved moral reasoning and ethical decision-making. It's pretty great stuff. The problem, though, in thinking about mindfulness as connected with all of this great stuff is it inclines people to think about it almost like medicine that you can take. I mean, if there was such a wonder drug, we'd all want to get me some of that. But how does one get mindfulness? It kind of begs the question, even though we talk about it a lot, what even is mindfulness? So I think one of the best quotes about mindfulness that I've read is actually not ever intended as an illustration of mindfulness concepts exactly, and predated any of the formal work of mindfulness in the field. It's by Carl Jung, and he didn't talk exactly about mindfulness in the way that we're used to. The quote reads, "There's no coming to consciousness without pain. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, in order to avoid facing their own soul. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." This is not exactly what you usually get in a presentation of mindfulness. In fact, if you do a quick Google search image, like I did here, what you'll get is a list of concepts and images that reflect all sorts of cool charts, balanced rocks, floaty people, and inspirational quotes. Sans all that Jungian ominousness. And water. You get a lot of water. This is consistent with the image of all of the good stuff that you can get from mindfulness. All that stuff you want to get some of. Now, this is, for me, not necessarily a bad thing. It really helps me in my practice when I bring in mindfulness as a concept, that people don't think about me as this guy. I know. What's wrong with that guy? The problem, though, is that the concepts of mindfulness make people think about this woman. But in fact, often what they're experiencing is something more like this. So to get what mindfulness is and how to use it, we often need to start by talking about what mindfulness is not. Mindfulness is not exotic or fantastic. It does not occur exclusively on tropical beaches. It doesn't really have anything to do with stacked rocks. It's not having a blank mind. It doesn't allow you to float above it all, become emotionless, withdraw from life, seek bliss, or escape pain. Basically, mindfulness is not this woman. So then what is mindfulness? Well, Kabat-Zinn's definition is being fully present without judgment in the current moment with acceptance of reality, as Melanie mentioned earlier. And this definition is really good, although it can seem less okay if your reality is really awful. And reality is sometimes, in fact, pretty awful. Often, that's the whole reason someone might come to see me, because their current reality is awful and they want me to help them make it not so awful. Can you accept without judgment then? It's tricky. I would argue that you can, but it is important to know what you're accepting and why you're accepting it. Some of Kabat-Zinn's most interesting work, I think, and stuff that really got him a lot of attention early on, was his work with folks with chronic pain. Anyone who's experienced this or has a friend or a loved one with chronic pain knows how really horrible and life-wrecking that can be. Pain is one of the most fundamentally aversive experiences there is. The message of pain is that you need to get away from whatever is causing the pain. The medical strategy for managing pain usually follows this. The goal is either to correct the problem causing the pain, or if there is no correctable problem, to medically stop the pain. The problem for this, for folks with chronic pain, of course, is that it, first of all, sometimes doesn't work. And even when it does, the medical strategies for pain management often have many significant downsides, including side effects, diminishing effectiveness, and addictive qualities. Another problem is what our brains and bodies do with a situation in which we're dealt with something that cannot be thought of as anything except unacceptable, and yet can't get away from it. In such cases, every moment my pain is with me represents a crisis of sorts, a failure, prompting my brain to chronically seek escape. Physiologically, this is terrible because it puts one's body in a sort of perpetual stress response state, which drains the body of energy, reduces effectiveness of our digestive and endocrine systems. Psychologically, depression and anxiety symptoms become almost inevitable. Cognitive functioning declines and often leads to less effective life and medical management. So Kabat-Zinn's approach to this was premised on the notion that enhancing chronic pain with perpetual stress is a terrible idea, and that while the chronic pain may not be able to be reduced or eliminated, the chronic stress is not necessarily required to accompany the pain. So he taught folks how to meditate. Taught meditation as a strategy to help practice mindfulness, and I will talk just a little bit about meditation in a bit here. But doing so helped many of them get to a place where their body was not exacerbating the pain with its own stress response. This is that kind of non-medical mindset of sorts I was talking about, not going after the actual medical problem, i.e. the pain. Now, this is not presuming that people shouldn't use medical strategies to reduce pain by any stretch. It's also not somehow trying to trick your brain into thinking the pain away. And what it is it's about not making things worse when you can't make things better in the way that you would like. Pain and seemingly unacceptable situations present in a lot of different forms. Whether it's physical, psychological, financial, relationship, bad stuff happens, and managing it is tough to do. So I think it actually can be helpful to understand what is going on in our heads that can make being mindful so difficult. So I wanted to take just a few minutes and provide what I think of as a ridiculously oversimplified explanation of why mindfulness works from a neurobiological perspective. When I talk about this stuff, I sometimes think it's helpful to think about it as having two brains. Now, this isn't really accurate. Probably a better analogy of what goes on up here is that what happens up here is kind of like a small intranet system with a whole bunch of different processing centers working simultaneously in constant communication with one another. But for our purposes, we can focus on two important subsystems. By the way, Melanie didn't want me to show a brain. She's like, that's kind of hacky for a psychologist to show a brain. But I was explaining to her that the American Psychological Association requires us anytime we get up in front of a group to show a picture of a brain. So this is required. It's something I can do. Anyway, as I was saying, for our purposes, we can focus on these two important subsystems, broadly described here as our thinking and our feeling brains. The different roles of our emotional and rational systems is important in that what we experience as reality is actually a conglomerate picture, and it doesn't work exactly like we might think it does. So, take our emotional system. Emotions emerged during the mammalian evolution, to enhance the adaptation to our environment and learning from experience. Emotional responses are initiated by an automatic and unconscious assessment of the environment, which our brain matches with our past experiences and understanding of the world. It gives us how we feel. This is really useful in a lot of ways. It gives us the chance to get cued into our environment quickly, to know what to pay attention to, and to be prepared for responding to likely situations. From an evolutionary perspective, this makes perfect sense. So let's say some ancient ancestor of mine was wandering around the plains of Africa and it started to rain. Then they might think, I need some shelter. They look for a cave. They see a cave. But you get into the cave and there's a lion. The lion tries to eat you and you jump out and you barely escape with your life. So if you are a person who's going to survive, pass along your genetic material, and come back and be an ancient ancestor of mine, it's helpful for you to next time feel afraid when you approach a cave or any sort of environment where lions might be hiding. But here's the thing. The next time it's raining, and my ancestor sees a cave and again thinks I need shelter, and now feels afraid, does that mean there's a lion in this cave? Of course not. It's maybe a good idea then for me to also go into the cave, because in addition to not being eaten by a lion, I also need to get exposed from the rain and die that way. So we have this juxtaposition then of the feeling being not wrong, but not necessarily accurate to the present situation. It's just part of my brain trying to take care of me, but it's not necessarily a fit with present reality. So the fact that our brains are set up this way is really important to know, because emotions experienced in any situation by their nature influence how we think about the situation. It's part of how we're wired to make sense of the world. That isn't right. Help me out here. I knew I was going to screw this up. All right. So, it's important to understand that, okay, now we're going to have to skip all the way through here. I did it again. Okay. Emotions influence how we think about the world. And it's there we go, the thinking challenge. This is often fine, but it's important to understand that emotions are not by their nature irrational. Their purpose is to get our attention, prep us for certain kinds of events. However, we often make meaning out of the events experienced through rationalizing our emotions, but what we think is we're experiencing objective reality, and this can result in missing critical information and misunderstanding what's going on. So this little guy is experiencing emotions. Maybe he had a rough day foraging and he's all stressed out, and now no one will give him a hug, causing further stress and upset. The quote here reads, "All that I'm asking is when I get stressed, someone give me a hug. Frankly, that doesn't seem so unreasonable. Why can no one in my life do even a simple thing for me?" The problem is, brain makes sense of the upset in a way that fits his emotion but doesn't fit with reality. something else may be at play here, but he doesn't see it. The take-home from this is be careful about believing everything you think. For me, it calls to mind a Buddhist story of Mara, who's a sort of a Buddhist version of the devil people may be familiar with. The story goes like this. One day, Mara, the evil one, was traveling through the villages of India with his attendants, and he saw a man doing a walking meditation whose face was lit up in wonder. The man had just discovered something on the ground in front of him. Mara's attendant asked what it was, and Mara said, well, he's found a piece of truth. Doesn't this bother you when someone finds a piece of truth, O evil one? His attendant asked. No, Mara replied. Right after this, they usually make a belief out of it. Life gives us a lot of truth. We have feelings in response. Then sometimes we make beliefs out of them. I got a call from a school again. My kid did not complete his homework. I feel pretty disappointed and upset. This is the umpteenth time. And I think he's lazy. He's uncommitted. Any potential problems there? I watched a news report about a candidate for someone who I think is absurd, idiotic, and possibly sociopathic. I know who that could be. But look at all these people cheering for this person. I feel angry and afraid. I think my belief, our society is doomed. It can work the other way, too. My student told me that my suggestion was so helpful in getting her unstuck. I'm the best teacher she's ever had. I feel excited and flattered. My belief, this is a remarkably astute person who will do really well in my class. Same kind of thing. The mindfulness solution is not to fault our emotions. We just have them. This is, when we feel bad, just a recipe for feeling bad about feeling bad. But all feelings are just part of my brain doing its job, trying to take care of me. However, being mindful also allows us the cognitive flexibility to not believe all of the thoughts that come into our head. It allows us to hold discrepancies between our thoughts and emotions and to accept the possibility that things may not be as they seem. So our task is to be fully present with them in the current moment with acceptance of reality. Okay, so I've talked a lot about mindfulness. What about meditation? What's the relationship? Well, I think that meditation is simply exercise that helps train our brain to be mindful. That is, to stay present in the moment, or to be more inclined to do so. Experiencing but not following our emotions is really hard work. So just like with any difficult task, it's good to train. I talk with folks in my practice a lot about meditation. And quite often what I hear is kind of what Melanie alluded to earlier, that they maybe tried it at some point, but it didn't work for them. So I just say, well, why didn't it work? Well, I got too distracted. Now, if meditation is exercise to help you build your ability to not be distracted, to say that it didn't work because you got too distracted seems akin to someone who's never worked out getting on a treadmill, going for a minute or so, getting winded, and saying, well, I got tired, so clearly that exercise stuff doesn't work for me. No, it works fine. You're just out of shape, which is the whole reason why the exercise is a good idea for you. So usually I ask what people did do, and often it involves some effort at achieving blank mind and getting sore knees or something like that. So when I talk with them about what meditation is, at its core, I say that it's simply focused attention on something, usually for a defined period of time. This, in theory, can be anything. The focusing part is the exercise. And, as Melanie was saying before, the key is not what you do, but that you do it. So, and I know there are a lot of experienced meditators here, but I also suspect there are a lot of folks here who either haven't meditated or who have believed that they failed at it. So I'd like to provide just a very, very brief sort of conceptual introduction to the most basic form of meditation, which is a breath meditation. We did a version of that earlier, but encourage you to give it a try again. In other words, don't just do something, sit there. When you sit there, first of all, remember that meditation is exercise, it's not relaxation. So you're planning for a workout, you're not planning to feel good. Set a timer. You don't get on a treadmill until you feel like getting off, otherwise you'll be off in 10 seconds, or I will. So set a timer and do it for that period of time. Hang in there. 5 or 10 minutes is fine. Just make sure that you're doing it for some defined period of time. And of course, one of the easiest ways to start is with a simple breath meditation. Just as Melanie was saying, you can get a cardio work from biking or swimming or Zumba. There's different ways that you can get that workout. So ultimately what you want to do is you want to find something that works for you so that you can stick with it. But breath is probably the simplest, easiest way to start. So one of the things, the really easiest thing you can do is you can simply count your breath. So in your head, you could count just 1, 2, and if you get to 10, you go back to 1 and go that till the timer goes off. What it actually looks like in your head, though, is usually something pretty different, and it's important. What it can look like in your head is something more to the effect of 1, 2, God, my knee hurts. Did I do something to it? And I hope I don't need surgery. Is that the knee that was hurting the other day? When this happens, it's not a failure. It's not you doing it wrong. It's not that it's not working. Your task at that point is to catch yourself having gone off and come back. That's the workout. 1, 2. God, I love waffles. I love them. I really love them. Can you get addicted to waffles? You put honey in waffles? Wait, I'm off. You come back, and every time that you notice you're off and you come back, that is the exercise. It's like a rep in strength training or a stress when you're doing cardio work. And you come back 5 times or 10 times or 50 times, and the more that you do it, the better you'll get at it. You'll be less inclined to go off as often, and you'll find yourself wandering around in waffle land for a less period of time before you catch yourself and you come back. And over time, it helps build your strength, build your tolerance, in the same way that good cardio, health, or strength training does. It helps you in a whole bunch of ways, in this way, to help be more mindful in your life. So give it a try. So, in conclusion, as you use, we run slides. There we go. We face a lot of challenges in staying present mindfully. When a quest for truth is your sacrament and service is your prayer, it requires a lot of attention paying and active engagement. In the framework of our way of being in the world, I think there is a lot of opportunity for following our frustration and upset into thinking that is not accurate in some important ways. But these allow us to model for each other and our community engagement that is consistent with who we are and what we believe. When we do that with one another, and when we do it as a whole congregation, I think we can serve as a wonderful model. Every time I see us putting up a new Black Lives Matter sign when the old one gets vandalized and torn down, I think it's kind of like a return to breath, a return to focus. And in those moments, individually and collectively, we get to practice being, even when it's aversive to be.